Before the Roman Empire ruled the known world, it had to fight for survival against a fierce rival across the sea, Carthage. What followed were the Punic Wars, a series of brutal, world-shaping conflicts that would decide the fate of the Mediterranean. From Hannibal's daring march over the Alps to Rome's relentless siege of Carthage, these wars were battles of strategy, strength, and sheer determination. In today's video, we journey back to one of history's greatest rivalries, a clash between two superpowers that changed the ancient world forever. This is the story of the Punic Wars. In the heart of the Mediterranean, where azure waters kissed golden shores and trade routes crisscrossed like veins in a living body, two great powers rose to prominence, Carthage and Rome. The year was 2064 BCE, and tensions between these mighty civilizations simmered beneath the surface, waiting for the spark that would ignite an inferno spanning generations. Carthage stood as a beacon of maritime dominance. Founded by Phoenician settlers centuries earlier, it had grown into a sprawling empire, stretching across North Africa, Spain, Sicily, and beyond. Its wealth came from its vast trading networks, with ships laden with precious metals, textiles, and exotic goods docking at its bustling harbors daily. Carthaginian merchants spoke multiple languages, their tongues fluent in negotiation, diplomacy, profit. Yet behind this facade of commerce lay a military machine unmatched in naval prowess. The Carthaginians were masters of the sea, their quinqueremas slicing through waves with terrifying speed and precision. Their generals, men such as Hamilcar Barca, commanded not just fleets but also legions of mercenaries drawn from every corner of the known world. Loyalty was bought with gold, and discipline enforced with iron. Farther north, on the Italian peninsula, another power flexed its muscles. Rome, once a humble collection of villages nestled along the Tiber River, had transformed itself into a republic unlike any other. It was built on principles of duty, honor, and collective governance. The Roman Senate, composed of patricians and plebeians alike, debated policy while consuls led armies into battle. Unlike Carthage's reliance on hired swords, Rome fielded citizen soldiers, farmers who left their plows to fight for their homeland when called upon. These men fought not for personal gain but for glory and the preservation of their way of life. They marched under standards emblazoned with SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus, a proud declaration of unity between the Senate and the people of Rome. Yet despite their differences, both powers shared one trait: ambition. Each sought to expand its influence, control vital resources, and secure its place as the preeminent force in the ancient world. For years, they coexisted uneasily, their interests overlapping yet rarely clashing directly. But now, events unfolding on the island of Sicily threatened to shatter this fragile balance. Sicily, the jewel of the Mediterranean, sat strategically positioned between Europe and Africa. Its fertile plains yielded abundant wheat, olives, and grapes, while its cities, Palermo, Syracuse, Agrigentum, were hubs of culture and commerce. Control of Sicily meant access to lucrative trade routes and a foothold in the central Mediterranean. Both Rome and Carthage coveted the island, though neither dared openly challenge the other, until it began with a dispute over Messana, a key port city on Sicily's northeastern tip. Once a thriving Greek colony, Messana had fallen into chaos after internal strife erupted among rival factions. One group, desperate for allies, appealed to Rome for protection. Another turned to Carthage, whose garrison already occupied parts of the island. What started as a local squabble quickly escalated into something far greater. When Roman troops crossed the Strait of Messina to intervene, they effectively declared war on Carthage. Thus began the First Punic War, a conflict destined to reshape the destiny of the ancient world. As news of the invasion spread, reactions varied wildly. In Carthage, outrage mingled with resolve. Merchants worried about disrupted trade routes. Senators fretted over potential losses in prestige. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens took solace in tales of past victories against foes far mightier than Rome. Across the sea, Romans braced themselves for what promised to be their most formidable challenge yet. Farmers turned soldiers sharpened their swords. Mothers prayed to Vesta for their son's safe return. And politicians stoked patriotic fervor with speeches extolling Rome's divine mission. At the center of this brewing storm stood two figures whose fates would become intertwined forever. Hannibal Mago, a young officer in the Carthaginian navy, dreamed of proving himself worthy of his illustrious family name. His father, Hamilcar, had served with distinction during campaigns in Sardinia, earning accolades that weighed heavily on Hannibal's shoulders. Now, as he prepared to sail towards Sicily, Hannibal felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him. Failure was not an option. On the Roman side, Marcus Valerius Corvus emerged as a rising star within the ranks of the legions. Born to modest means, Marcus had clawed his way up through sheer determination and battlefield cunning. Known for his raven-like ability to swoop down on enemies unawares, he earned the nickname Corvus early in his career. As a tribune leading a cohort bound for Sicily, Marcus saw this campaign as his chance to cement his legacy. He vowed to bring honor to his family name, and perhaps even catch the eye of the beautiful Claudia, daughter of a prominent senator. Thus, the stage was set for a clash of titans. On land and sea, in council chambers and marketplaces, the seeds of conflict sprouted roots deep enough to alter history itself. Little did anyone know how many lives would be lost, how much blood would be spilled, before peace or destruction finally prevailed. As the Roman legions disembarked onto Sicilian soil, a palpable tension filled the air. The city of Messana loomed ahead, its walls scarred by years of conflict and neglect. Inside, rival factions vied for control, their infighting having drawn both Rome and Carthage into their desperate struggle. For Marcus Valerius Corvus, this was more than just a military engagement. It was an opportunity to prove himself as a leader and secure his place in history. Standing atop a hill overlooking the city, he surveyed the scene with sharp eyes. Smoke rose from scattered fires within Messana's confines, and the cries of its citizens echoed faintly across the plains. Meanwhile, offshore, Hannibal Mago paced the deck of his quinquerine. Frustration etched into his features. The Carthaginian fleet had arrived too late, prevent the Romans from landing. But they still held a significant advantage at sea. "We cannot afford to lose Messana," he muttered to his second-in-command, a grizzled veteran named Edarbal. "If Rome secures a foothold here, they'll use it as a base to strike deeper into our territories." Edarbal nodded grimly. "Then we must act swiftly. Our garrison inside the city is loyal, but outnumbered. If we coordinate with them, we can trap the Romans between our forces." Hannibal clenched his fists. Time was of the essence. He signaled for a messenger boat to be dispatched to the Carthaginian commander stationed in Messana, instructing him to prepare for a coordinated attack. As dusk fell, the Mediterranean sky blazed with fiery hues. casting long shadows over the battlefield that awaited. That night, Marcus convened a war council with his fellow tribunes. Around a crude map drawn in the dirt, they debated strategy. Some argued for an immediate assault on Messana, believing surprise could tip the scales in their favor. Others cautioned patience, urging reconnaissance to gauge the strength of the defenders and identify weaknesses in the city's defenses. Marcus listened intently, weighing each argument. Finally, he spoke. "We are here not only to claim Messana, but to demonstrate Rome's resolve. Let us divide our forces. One cohort will remain camped outside the city gates, ready to engage any sortie from within. Another will march along the eastern flank to cut off potential reinforcements from Syracuse. I will lead the main force directly against the northern gate under cover of darkness." His plan was bold, perhaps even reckless, but it carried the virtue of speed, a quality Rome desperately needed if it hoped to outmaneuver Carthage. With little time to spare, orders were issued, and preparations began. At dawn, the battle commenced. Roman siege engines groaned as they launched boulders toward Messana's fortified walls. Dust and debris filled the air as the projectiles struck home, weakening sections of the ancient stone barrier. Inside the city, chaos reigned. Civilians fled for shelter, while Carthaginian mercenaries scrambled to defend their positions. Arrows rained down from the ramparts, forcing the advancing Romans to raise their shields in tight formations, known as testudos. From his position aboard ship, Hannibal watched the unfolding carnage with mounting unease. The Romans were relentless, pressing forward despite heavy casualties. "Signal the fleet to move closer," he commanded. "Use our catapults to bombard their siege engines. We cannot let them breach the walls." The Carthaginian ships advanced cautiously, their decks crowded with archers and ballistae operators. Volley after volley arced toward the Roman lines, sowing confusion among the attackers. Yet Marcus remained undeterred. Spotting a breach in the wall caused by earlier bombardments, he rallied his men. "For Rome," he shouted, raising his gladius high. With a deafening roar, the legionaries surged forward, pouring through the gap and into the heart of Messana. Inside the city, brutal street-to-street fighting erupted. Swords clashed, shields splintered, and blood flowed freely. The Carthaginians fought valiantly, using narrow alleys and crumbling buildings to their advantage. But the sheer determination of the Romans proved overwhelming. Slowly but surely, they pushed deeper into the city, driving their enemies back toward the central square. By midday, the tide had turned decisively in Rome's favor. Seeing no other option, the Carthaginian garrison sounded a retreat, slipping out through hidden tunnels beneath the city. Hannibal, witnessing the collapse of resistance from afar, cursed under his breath. "We underestimated them," he admitted bitterly to Adherbal. "Rome fights like a cornered lion." Marcus stood amidst the ruins of Messana, his armor streaked with dirt and blood. Victory had come at great cost. Hundreds of his men lay dead or wounded, but it was a victory nonetheless. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battered city in shadow, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. This was only the beginning. Ahead lay countless battles, untold hardships, and a foe unlike any Rome had faced before. But for now, Messana belonged to Rome, and with it, a foothold in the heart of the Mediterranean. While lords clashed on the battlefield, another kind of warfare unfolded in the courts and council chambers of the ancient world. Diplomacy played a crucial role in shaping the early stages of the First Punic War. as both Rome and Carthage sought to rally allies to their cause. In Syracuse, one of Sicily's most powerful city-states, King Hero II found himself caught between the two warring powers. A shrewd politician and seasoned warrior, Hero understood that aligning with either side carried risks and rewards. Initially, Hero leaned toward Carthage, viewing them as the lesser threat compared to Rome's aggressive expansionism. However, when Roman emissaries arrived bearing gifts and promises of mutual benefit, he hesitated. Among them was Quintus Fabius Maximus, a seasoned diplomat whose silver tongue rivaled his tactical acumen. Over lavish feasts and private meetings, Quintus painted a compelling picture of a future where Syracuse stood as Rome's equal partner rather than Carthage's subordinate ally. "You have much to gain by joining us," Quintus told Hero during one such meeting. "Together, we can drive the Carthaginians from Sicily entirely. Imagine the prosperity your people will enjoy when freed from their oppressive tariffs and naval blockades." Hero listened carefully, weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, siding with Rome offered the prospect of greater autonomy and economic freedom. On the other, angering Carthage risked retaliation that could devastate his kingdom. Ultimately, pragmatism won out. After weeks of deliberation, Hero announced his decision. Syracuse would join forces with Rome. The alliance proved pivotal, with Syracuse's resources and strategic location bolstering their efforts. The Romans gained a critical advantage. Carthage, meanwhile, struggled to counter this development. Their diplomats traveled tirelessly, attempting to sway neutral states and dissuade wavering allies from defecting. Yet their reputation as ruthless overlords preceded them, making many hesitant to commit fully to their cause. Back in Rome, the Senate celebrated the news of Syracuse's defection. Senators toasted to the wisdom of their leaders and the bravery of their soldiers. But amid the revelry, whispers of dissent emerged. Not everyone agreed with the war effort. Cato the Elder, a staunch traditionalist, voiced concerns about stretching Rome's resources too thin. "We are farmers, not conquerors," he argued during a heated debate. "This obsession with empire building distracts us from our true purpose, protecting our homeland." Despite these reservations, the majority supported continued aggression against Carthage. The stakes were simply too high to back down now. Control of Sicily meant dominance over the western Mediterranean, a prize worth any sacrifice. As winter approached, both sides prepared for the next phase of the conflict. In Carthage, new recruits poured into training camps, while shipyards buzzed with activity as craftsmen worked tirelessly to expand the navy. Across the sea, Rome mobilized additional legions, drawing upon its vast pool of manpower. Farmers left their fields once more, answering the call to arms. Merchants adjusted trade routes to avoid hostile waters, and priests prayed fervently for divine intervention. For ordinary citizens, life grew increasingly difficult. Food shortages plagued coastal towns as supply lines were disrupted by naval skirmishes. Families mourned sons and brothers lost in battle, their grief compounded by uncertainty about the future. Yet amidst the hardship, resilience prevailed. Stories of heroism spread like wildfire, inspiring hope even in the darkest times. One such tale involved Lucilla, a young woman from a small village near Capua. When her husband was conscripted into the army, she took up his plow and tended their fields alone. Her determination earned her the admiration of neighbors, who dubbed her the farmer's shield. Though she never wielded a sword, her quiet courage became a symbol of endurance for those left behind. As the year drew to a close, neither side showed signs of yielding. The First Punic War had only just begun, yet already it had claimed countless lives and reshaped destinies. For Marcus Valerius Corvus, Hannibal Mago, and countless others swept up in its wake. The road ahead promised both glory and ruin. Only time would tell which fate awaited them. The Mediterranean shimmered under the relentless sun, its waters a mirror reflecting the ambitions of two empires locked in mortal combat. While Rome had secured a foothold on Sicilian soil with their victory at Messana, it became increasingly clear that land battles alone would not decide the outcome of the First Punic War. Control of the seas, the lifeblood of trade, supply lines, and troop movements was essential for dominance. And so began one of history's most remarkable naval arms races. As Rome, a nation traditionally reliant on legions rather than fleets, sought to challenge Carthage's centuries-old mastery of the waves. For Hannibal Mago, stationed aboard his flagship near the Lipari Islands, the situation was both infuriating and intriguing. He watched as Roman shipyards sprang up along Italy's southern coast, their workers feverishly constructing vessels modeled after captured Carthaginian quenquerames. To him, this audacity bordered on madness. How could farmers and infantrymen possibly hope to match the skill and experience of Carthage's seasoned sailors? Yet he couldn't deny the Romans' determination. They were building faster than anyone thought possible, pouring resources into an endeavor they had no prior expertise in. It was a gamble, but one fueled by desperation and perhaps genius. In Rome, Marcus Valerius Corvus found himself tasked with overseeing part of this unprecedented effort. Though he was a soldier first and foremost, his leadership during the siege of Messana had earned him a new role, training raw recruits to fight aboard ships. The transition from land to sea was daunting, even for someone as adaptable as Marcus. "We're not fishermen or traders," he told his men during their first muster on the docks of Ostia. "But we are Romans. If we can conquer mountains and deserts, we can learn to rule the tides." The Roman strategy hinged on innovation. Unable to replicate the intricate seamanship of the Carthaginians, they instead focused on brute force and ingenuity. Engineers developed a device called the Corvus, a boarding bridge equipped with a spike that could be dropped onto enemy decks, allowing Roman legionaries to swarm across like ants overwhelming a hive. This contraption transformed naval warfare into something resembling land battles, playing directly to Rome's strength. For Marcus, who had earned his nickname Corvus long before this invention, it felt almost poetic. Meanwhile, in Carthage, leaders convened in heated debates over how best to counter this emerging threat. The Senate chambers buzzed with tension as admirals clashed with merchants over resource allocation. Some argued for expanding the fleet further, while others insisted on fortifying existing positions. Hamilcar Barca, recently appointed commander-in-chief of Carthaginian forces in Sicily, offered a bold proposal: launch preemptive strikes against Roman ports before their fledgling navy could grow strong enough to pose a real danger. Hamilcar's plan was approved, and preparations began in earnest. Under cover of darkness, Carthaginian squadrons set sail for the Italian mainland, targeting key shipbuilding centers. Their raids were swift and devastating, torching dockyards and sinking half-finished vessels. News of these attacks reached Rome, sparking outrage and renewed urgency. The Senate authorized emergency funding to accelerate construction, and within months, dozens of newly minted warships joined the growing Roman fleet. The first major naval engagement occurred off the coast of Mylae in 2060 BC. Both sides knew the stakes. Victory would grant psychological momentum, while defeat could cripple morale. As dawn broke over the horizon, the opposing fleets formed battle lines, each ship adorned with banners fluttering in the salty breeze. On the Roman side, Consul Gaius Duilius commanded the flagship, flanked by Marcus and other veteran officers. Opposing them was Admiral Hannibal Mago, eager to prove himself worthy of his family name. When the signal horns sounded, chaos erupted. Carthaginian quinqueremes surged forward, their oars slicing through the water with practiced precision. Roman ships lagged slightly behind, hampered by less experienced rowers. But as the distance closed, the tide turned dramatically. With a deafening crash, the first Corvus slammed down onto a Carthaginian deck. Legionaries poured across, hacking and slashing with brutal efficiency. One by one, Roman ships repeated the maneuver, turning what should have been a rout into a grinding melee. From his position near the rear of the formation, Hannibal watched in horror as his carefully orchestrated tactics unraveled. The Corvus neutralized Carthage's superior seamanship, forcing his men into close-quarters combat where they were outmatched. Try as he might, he couldn't rally his captains to break free from the Roman encirclement. By midday, the outcome was clear. Carthage had suffered a crushing defeat. Gaius Duilius celebrated the victory with characteristic Roman flair, erecting a column in the forum adorned with captured Carthaginian rams, a monument to Rome's newfound naval prowess. For Marcus, standing among the cheering crowds, pride mingled with unease. He knew this was only the beginning. While the Battle of Mylae marked a turning point, the war was far from over. Carthage still controlled vast territories and possessed reserves of wealth and manpower that made them formidable adversaries. Back in Carthage, news of the loss sent shockwaves through the city. Senators demanded answers, and Hannibal faced harsh scrutiny for his role in the debacle. Yet amidst the recriminations, a glimmer of hope emerged. Hannibal, ever loyal, reminded his friend that setbacks were inevitable in wars of this magnitude. "We will adapt," he said firmly, "and next time, we will win." Adaptation came swiftly. Carthaginian engineers devised countermeasures to disable the Corvus, including reinforced decks and grappling hooks designed to tear the bridges loose. Training intensified, emphasizing evasive maneuvers to avoid boarding actions altogether. Meanwhile, Rome doubled down on its successes, refining the design of its ships and expanding recruitment efforts to fill out crews. As the year progressed, skirmishes erupted across the western Mediterranean. Each clash brought lessons learned and strategies refined. For every Roman triumph, there was a Carthaginian counterstrike. For every setback, a renewed push forward. The naval arms race escalated into a deadly game of cat and mouse, with neither side able to deliver a knockout blow. Yet beyond the battles lay deeper consequences. The strain of maintaining massive fleets drained treasuries and strained economies. In Carthage, discontent simmered among the lower classes, who bore the brunt of increased taxes and conscription. In Rome, families struggled to cope with the absence of breadwinners. Their fields left fallow as sons and husbands sailed off to war. Merchants complained bitterly about disrupted trade routes, while priests prayed fervently for divine favor. Despite these hardships, the resolve of both nations remained unbroken. Leaders on both sides understood that surrender was unthinkable. For Carthage, losing the war meant relinquishing its status as a dominant power. For Rome, failure would expose vulnerabilities that could unravel the Republic itself. Thus, the struggle continued, driven by ambition, pride, and the unyielding will to prevail. As winter approached, the fighting slowed but did not cease entirely. Fleets patrolled contested waters, daring each other to make the first move. In harbors and shipyards, repairs and reinforcements kept pace with destruction. And in the hearts of those caught in the maelstrom, hope and fear waged their own silent battles. For Marcus Valerius Corvus and Hannibal Barca, the coming months promised further tests of courage and cunning. Each man carried the weight of expectation, not just from their respective nations, but from history itself. Whether they would rise to meet that challenge remained to be seen. One thing, however, was certain: the Mediterranean would never be the same again. As the First Punic War entered its second year, the focus of the conflict shifted inland to the fertile plains of southern Sicily. Here, amidst rolling hills dotted with olive groves and vineyards, lay the ancient city of Agrigentum, a prize coveted by both Rome and Carthage. Known for its towering temples dedicated to Zeus, Hera, and Athena, Agrigentum was not only a symbol of wealth and culture, but also a strategic stronghold. Control of this city would grant dominion over the surrounding region, securing vital resources and cutting off enemy supply lines. For Marcus Valerius Corvus, now promoted to the rank of tribune, the siege of Agrigentum represented an opportunity to solidify his reputation as a leader. Having proven himself on the battlefield at Messana and aboard ship during the Battle of Mylae, he was eager to demonstrate his tactical acumen in prolonged engagements. Yet the task ahead was daunting. Agrigentum's walls were formidable, built to withstand sieges, and its defenders were bolstered by Carthaginian reinforcements, led by Hannibal Barca, who had returned from his naval defeat determined to redeem himself. The Roman army arrived outside Agrigentum's gates in early spring, their banners fluttering in the cool breeze. Behind them stretched a vast encampment of tents and fortifications, a temporary city erected to support the siege effort. Marcus surveyed the scene with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Though Rome's forces outnumbered those within the city, breaking through Agrigentum's defenses would require patience, ingenuity, and sacrifice. Inside the city, preparations for resistance were already underway. Hannibal coordinated closely with local leaders, ensuring that food stores were secured and water supplies rationed. Morale remained high among the defenders, buoyed by the belief that Carthage's superior logistics and reinforcements would eventually turn the tide. "We are not alone," Hannibal assured the citizens during a public address. "Our allies across the sea will come to our aid. Hold firm, and victory shall be ours." The initial weeks of the siege passed in a tense stalemate. Roman siege engines rained projectiles onto Agrigentum's walls, causing minor breaches that were quickly repaired by the defenders. Attempts to scale the walls using ladders ended in disaster, as volleys of arrows and boiling oil repelled the attackers. Frustration mounted among the Roman ranks, leading some officers to question whether the siege was worth the cost. Casualties mounted, supplies dwindled, and disease began to spread through the camp. Marcus recognized the need for a change in strategy. Drawing inspiration from past campaigns, he proposed constructing a circumvallation, a massive wall encircling the entire city to cut off all avenues of escape or resupply. This ambitious plan required immense labor and resources, but Marcus argued it was the only way to force Agrigentum into submission. After heated debate, the Senate approved the proposal, and work began immediately. The construction of the circumvallation marked a turning point in the siege. With no hope of relief from outside, the people of Agrigentum faced the grim reality of starvation. Food shortages became acute, and tempers flared as desperation set in. Hannibal, though outwardly composed, knew that time was running out. To break the deadlock, Hannibal devised a daring plan. Under cover of darkness, he led a small contingent of elite troops through a hidden tunnel beneath the city walls. Their mission was to strike at the Roman supply depots and disrupt the siege machinery. The operation caught the Romans off guard, inflicting significant damage before they could regroup. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Hannibal might succeed in tipping the balance. But Marcus was quick to adapt. Recognizing the vulnerability exposed by the night raid, he ordered increased patrols around the perimeter and reinforced key positions. When Hannibal attempted a second sortie days later, he found the Romans waiting. A fierce skirmish ensued, ending in a bloody stalemate that left both sides battered but unbroken. As summer gave way to autumn, the strain on Agrigentum grew unbearable. Reports of cannibalism filtered out of the city, horrifying even the most hardened warriors. Inside the walls, dissent brewed among the populace, with some factions calling for surrender to spare further suffering. Hannibal resisted these calls, clinging to the hope that Carthaginian reinforcements would arrive in time to save the city. Finally, in late December, the end came. A traitor within Agrigentum's ranks opened one of the gates under cover of darkness, allowing Roman forces to pour into the city. What followed was a brutal sack, as years of pent-up frustration erupted into violence. Buildings burned, treasures were looted, and countless lives were lost. Hannibal managed to escape with a handful of loyal followers, slipping away through another secret passage moments before the city fell. For Marcus, standing atop the ruins of Agrigentum's once magnificent temples, the victory felt hollow. The cost had been staggering, not just in terms of lives lost, but in the scars left on the land and its people. Yet there was no denying the strategic importance of the triumph. With Agrigentum under Roman control, the path to conquering Sicily seemed clearer than ever. In Carthage, news of the city's fall sent shockwaves through the ruling class. Senators demanded answers, pointing fingers at Hannibal for his failure to hold the line. Though Adherbal and others defended him, the young officer bore the weight of shame heavily. "I have failed my family," he confessed bitterly, "but I swear, Rome will pay for this." Back in Rome, celebrations erupted in the streets. The Senate declared a public holiday, and sacrifices were made to Jupiter in gratitude for the victory. Marcus received honors for his role in the siege, including a mural crown awarded to those who saved fellow citizens in battle. Yet despite the accolades, he found little joy in the aftermath. The faces of fallen comrades haunted his dreams, and the cries of Agrigentum's doomed inhabitants echoed in his ears. Winter brought a lull in the fighting, as both sides retreated to lick their wounds and plan their next moves. For Rome, the capture of Agrigentum was a stepping stone toward greater ambitions. For Carthage, it was a wake-up call, an urgent reminder that survival depended on adapting to Rome's relentless determination. As snow blanketed the Italian peninsula and rain soaked the plains of North Africa, the stage was set for the next phase of the war. Both empires braced themselves for what promised to be an even bloodier struggle. And somewhere between them, the Mediterranean churned with anticipation, bearing witness to the unfolding drama of two titans locked in an epic battle for supremacy. The fall of Agrigentum sent shockwaves through Carthage, shaking the foundations of its confidence and exposing vulnerabilities that had long been hidden beneath a veneer of naval supremacy. While Hannibal Mago bore the brunt of public scorn for his failure to hold the city, Another figure emerged from the shadows to take command, a man whose name would become synonymous with resilience and cunning, Hamilcar Barca. Hamilcar was no stranger to warfare. Born into one of Carthage's most illustrious families, he had spent decades honing his skills as both a general and a strategist. His reputation preceded him, fearless in battle, ruthless in tactics, and unwavering in his loyalty to Carthage. Yet what set Hamilcar apart was not merely his military prowess, but his ability to inspire those around him. Soldiers followed him willingly, knowing that under his leadership, they stood a fighting chance against even the most daunting odds. When the Senate summoned him to address the crisis in Sicily, Hamilcar wasted no time in formulating a bold plan. Recognizing that direct confrontations with Rome's growing legions were unlikely to yield success, he proposed a strategy of guerrilla warfare, striking quickly, retreating swiftly, and wearing down the enemy over time. "We cannot match Rome's numbers," he declared during a heated session in the Senate chambers, "but we can outlast them. Let us turn Sicily into their graveyard." The proposal sparked debate. Some senators argued that such unconventional methods were beneath Carthage's dignity, while others feared it would embolden Rome further. But Hamilcar's charisma won the day. With backing from influential merchants and nobles, he secured funding for a new campaign and set sail for Sicily, determined to reclaim lost ground. Upon arriving on the island, Hamilcar wasted no time implementing his vision. He established a base of operations in the rugged interior, far from Roman-controlled territories. From this stronghold, he launched raids on Roman supply lines, ambushing convoys and destroying stockpiles of grain and weapons. Each strike was meticulously planned, exploiting terrain to maximize impact while minimizing risk. By avoiding pitched battles, Hamilcar ensured that his forces remained intact and capable of inflicting continuous damage. For Marcus Valerius Corvus, now serving as a senior tribune overseeing Roman efforts in Sicily, these hit-and-run tactics proved maddeningly elusive. Despite deploying scouts and increasing patrols, Roman forces struggled to pin down Hamilcar's elusive army. Time and again, they arrived at the scene of an attack only to find smoldering ruins and taunting messages scrawled on nearby rocks. To the Senate and people of Rome, one such message read, "From Hamilcar Barca, your humble servant." The words stung like salt in an open wound. Hamilcar's brilliance extended beyond battlefield maneuvers. Understanding the importance of local support, he cultivated alliances with native tribes who harbored resentment toward Rome's occupation. These tribes provided valuable intelligence, guiding Hamilcar's forces through treacherous mountain passes and alerting them to Roman movements. In return, Hamilcar offered protection and shared spoils from his raids, earning their loyalty and cooperation. As months passed, the effectiveness of Hamilcar's strategy became undeniable. Roman morale plummeted as soldiers grew weary of constant harassment and uncertainty. Supplies dwindled, forcing commanders to divert resources from other fronts to reinforce beleaguered garrisons. Even Marcus, renowned for his unshakable resolve, began to feel the strain. During a council of war held in Syracuse, he voiced his concerns openly. "This is not how wars are meant to be fought," he said grimly. "Hamilcar fights like a shadow we strike, and he vanishes. How do we defeat an enemy we cannot see?" His question hung heavy in the air, unanswered. For all their discipline and organization, the Romans were ill-equipped to counter Hamilcar's unconventional approach. Their traditional reliance on large-scale engagements left them vulnerable to attrition, a lesson they were learning the hard way. Meanwhile, Hamilcar pressed his advantage relentlessly. One of his boldest moves came in the spring of 258 BCE, when he led a daring assault on the Roman fortress of Panormus, modern-day Palermo. Situated on the northern coast of Sicily, Panormus served as a critical hub for Roman operations, housing supplies, ships, and troops. Capturing it would deal a severe blow to Rome's presence on the island. Under cover of darkness, Hamilcar's forces infiltrated the outskirts of the city, using tunnels dug by sympathetic locals to bypass defensive walls. Once inside, they unleashed chaos, setting fire to warehouses and engaging Roman guards in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Though unable to fully capture the fortress, Hamilcar inflicted devastating losses before withdrawing under the cover of dawn. The raid left Panormus crippled and demoralized, its defenders shaken to their core. News of the attack reached Rome, sparking outrage and calls for retaliation. The Senate dispatched additional legions to Sicily, vowing to crush Hamilcar once and for all. Among the reinforcements was Quintus Fabius Maximus, the seasoned diplomat turned general who had played a key role in securing Syracuse's alliance earlier in the war. Tasked with coordinating Roman efforts, Quintus recognized the need for a shift in strategy. "We must adapt or perish," he told Marcus during a private meeting. "Hamilcar has changed the rules of engagement. It is time we did the same." Quintus's solution was twofold. First, he ordered the construction of fortified outposts throughout Sicily, creating a network of strongholds designed to deter guerrilla attacks and provide safe havens for Roman forces. Second, he authorized the formation of specialized units trained specifically to counter ambushes and track enemy movements. These shadow hunters, as they came to be known, consisted of experienced veterans skilled in reconnaissance and stealth. The introduction of these measures marked a turning point in the conflict. Slowly but surely, Roman forces began to regain the initiative. Ambushes became less frequent, and supply lines stabilized. Morale improved as soldiers adapted to the new reality of irregular warfare. Even so, defeating Hamilcar outright remained a distant goal. Like a wraith haunting the hills of Sicily, he continued to evade capture, striking where least expected and disappearing before retribution could be exacted. By late summer, the war had settled into a grueling stalemate. Hamilcar's tactics kept Rome off balance, preventing them from consolidating gains or launching major offensives. At the same time, his inability to deliver a decisive victory frustrated Carthaginian leaders, who demanded results commensurate with the resources being poured into the campaign. Pressure mounted on both sides, testing the limits of endurance. For ordinary citizens caught in the crossfire, life grew increasingly unbearable. Villages burned, crops withered, and families fled their homes in search of safety. Priests prayed for an end to the bloodshed, while merchants lamented the collapse of trade networks. Yet amidst the suffering, stories of heroism emerged, tales of farmers turned soldiers defending their lands, women nursing wounded warriors back to health, and children risking everything to deliver messages across enemy lines. One such story involved a young shepherd named Tiberius, who lived near Mount Etna. When Hamilcar's forces descended upon his village, demanding food and shelter, Tiberius refused to comply. Instead, he led a small group of villagers into the mountains, using their knowledge of the terrain to evade capture. Over weeks, they gathered intelligence on Hamilcar's movements and relayed it to nearby Roman patrols. Their actions helped thwart several planned raids, earning them recognition as unsung heroes of the war. As autumn approached, both Rome and Carthage prepared for another winter of hardship. Supplies were stockpiled, fortifications reinforced, and plans drawn up for the coming year. For Marcus and Hamilcar, the stakes had never been higher. Each man carried the weight of expectation, not just from their respective nations, but from history itself. Whether they would rise to meet that challenge remained to be seen. One thing, however, was certain: the struggle for Sicily was far from over. As the First Punic War entered its 6th year, the Mediterranean became a theater of escalating naval conflict. With Rome's growing confidence at sea and Carthage's determination to reclaim dominance, both powers understood that control of the waters would ultimately decide the fate of Sicily, and perhaps the entire war. It was against this backdrop that one of the largest naval battles in ancient history unfolded, the Battle of Cape Ecnomus. The stage for this monumental clash was set in the summer of 256 BC, when Rome launched an ambitious campaign to invade North Africa itself. The strategy was bold and unprecedented: a direct assault on Carthage's homeland, designed to force their surrender by cutting off support for Sicilian operations. To execute this plan, the Roman Senate assembled a massive fleet consisting of over 33 ships, carrying tens of thousands of soldiers and supplies. At its helm stood two consuls, Marcus Atilius Regulus and Lucius Manlius Vulso Longus, seasoned commanders entrusted with leading the expedition. For Marcus Valerius Corvus, now serving as a senior officer aboard one of the flagship quinqueremes, the mission represented both opportunity and peril. Having proven himself in land battles and sieges, he viewed the invasion as a chance to cement his legacy as a leader capable of excelling in every aspect of warfare. Yet the scale of the operation left him uneasy. "We are stretching ourselves thin," he confided to Quintus Fabius Maximus during a private conversation aboard ship. "If we fail here, there may be no recovering." Quintus nodded grimly. "True enough, but failure is not an option. If we can bring the fight to Carthage's doorstep, we might finally break their will to resist." Meanwhile, across the waves, news of Rome's preparations reached Carthage, sparking panic among its leaders. The prospect of enemy forces landing on African soil was unthinkable, a threat to the very heart of their empire. In response, the Carthaginian Senate mobilized its own navy, assembling a formidable fleet of approximately 350 ships under the command of Admirals Hanno and Hamilcar, not to be confused with Hamilcar Barca. Their objective was clear: intercept and annihilate the Roman armada before it could reach North Africa. The opposing fleets met off the southern coast of Sicily near Cape Ecnomus, a rocky promontory jutting into the sea. As dawn broke over the horizon, the sight of hundreds of warships arrayed in battle formation filled sailors and soldiers alike with awe and dread. The air buzzed with anticipation, punctuated by the creak of oars and the snap of banners flapping in the breeze. Roman tactics relied heavily on their innovative Corvus boarding bridges, which had proven effective in previous engagements. However, the sheer size of the Carthaginian fleet presented a new challenge. To counter this, Marcus Atilius Regulus devised a novel formation resembling a giant wedge, with the heaviest ships positioned at the front to smash through enemy lines. Behind them trailed lighter vessels, tasked with protecting the transports carrying troops and supplies. As the signal horns sounded, the two fleets surged forward, colliding in a cacophony of splintering wood and clashing metal. The initial impact favored the Romans, whose disciplined rowers and superior numbers allowed them to breach the Carthaginian line. Ships locked together in chaotic melees, with legionaries swarming across Corvi to engage in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Blood stained the decks as swords flashed and shields shattered. Hamilcar, observing the chaos from his flagship, quickly adapted to the situation. Realizing that prolonged engagement with the Roman center was futile, he ordered a tactical retreat, drawing the enemy deeper into a trap. Meanwhile, Admiral Hanno led a flanking maneuver aimed at isolating and destroying the Roman rear guard. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the Carthaginians might turn the tide. But Marcus Valerius Corvus, stationed near the vulnerable rear, anticipated the danger. Rallying his men, he coordinated a desperate defense, using fire arrows and grappling hooks to fend off attackers. His quick thinking bought precious time for reinforcements to arrive, stabilizing the Roman position and allowing the rest of the fleet to regroup. By midday, the outcome became apparent. Despite their numerical advantage and clever tactics, the Carthaginians could not withstand the relentless pressure exerted by the Romans. Ship after ship succumbed to boarding parties or sank beneath the waves, leaving behind a trail of wreckage and bodies. By sunset, the Carthaginian fleet had been decisively defeated, losing nearly half its vessels while suffering minimal losses themselves. For Marcus and his comrades, victory at Cape Ecnomus felt like a turning point. Not only had they secured safe passage to North Africa, but they had also demonstrated beyond doubt that Rome could match and surpass Carthage on the seas. As celebrations erupted aboard the surviving ships, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of pride. Today, he declared to his men, "We have shown the world what Romans are made of." Yet even amid the jubilation, sobering realities loomed. The journey to North Africa remained fraught with peril, and the challenges awaiting them on foreign soil were unknown. Supplies were stretched thin, and morale would need constant bolstering if they hoped to sustain momentum. Moreover, the defeat at Cape Ecnomus stung deeply in Carthage, igniting calls for vengeance and prompting urgent discussions about how best to respond. Back in Carthage, the mood was somber yet resolute. Senators convened emergency sessions, debating whether to sue for peace or prepare for total war. Many argued that surrender was unthinkable. Others suggested negotiating terms to buy time for rebuilding their navy. Ultimately, pride won out. Carthage resolved to fight on, committing additional resources to defend its homeland. As autumn approached, the Roman fleet anchored off the coast of North Africa, preparing for the next phase of the campaign. Scouts reported that local tribes were wary of Roman intentions, complicating efforts to secure alliances or gather intelligence. Supplies dwindled faster than expected. Forcing commanders to ration food and water carefully. Disease spread through cramped quarters, further straining already frayed nerves. Despite these hardships, the decision was made to press inland toward Carthage itself. Led by Marcus Atilius Regulus, Roman forces disembarked and began marching across parched landscapes dotted with olive groves and scrubland. Their advance was slow but steady, marked by skirmishes with tribal militias and occasional ambushes by Carthaginian cavalry units. Each step brought them closer to their ultimate goal, but also deeper into hostile territory. For Hamilcar Barca, still operating in Sicily, news of the invasion ignited a mix of fury and admiration. Though far removed from the main theater of action, he recognized the significance of Rome's gambit. "They mean to bleed us dry," he muttered to Adherbal during a council of war. "But let them try. We will make them regret setting foot on our shores." As winter descended upon the Mediterranean, both empires braced themselves for what promised to be the bloodiest chapter yet in their protracted struggle. For Rome, success in North Africa could spell the end of Carthaginian resistance. For Carthage, failure meant the loss of everything they held dear. Between them lay fields soaked with blood, cities reduced to rubble, and countless lives hanging in the balance. And somewhere amidst the turmoil, Marcus Valerius Corvus and Hamilcar Barca prepared for the battles ahead, each driven by duty, honor, and the unyielding will to prevail. The Roman invasion of North Africa marked a pivotal moment in the First Punic War, a bold gambit that carried the potential to end the conflict decisively, or plunge both empires into even greater chaos. As Marcus Atilius Regulus led his forces ashore near the modern-day city of Tunis, the stakes could not have been higher. For Rome, this campaign represented an opportunity to strike at the heart of Carthage and force their surrender. For Carthage, it was a desperate fight for survival, with the fate of their homeland hanging precariously in the balance. The landing itself went smoothly, aided by favorable winds and minimal resistance from local defenders who had fled inland at the sight of the massive Roman fleet. Soldiers disembarked onto sandy beaches under the watchful eyes of towering dunes, their armor glinting in the harsh African sun. Behind them stretched fields of golden grasses and sparse olive trees, a landscape both foreign and forbidding. Marcus Valerius Corvus, now commanding a cohort within the vanguard, surveyed the terrain with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "This land is unlike anything we've faced before," he remarked to Quintus Fabius Maximus, who stood beside him. "It will test us in ways we cannot yet imagine." Quintus nodded grimly. "Indeed, but remember this, Marcus, fear is as much a weapon as any sword. If we show resolve, the locals may hesitate to oppose us." True to his words, early encounters with native tribes proved less hostile than expected. Many villagers chose flight over confrontation, abandoning their homes and livestock rather than risk engaging the disciplined Roman legions. Others offered cautious cooperation, providing meager supplies in exchange for promises of leniency. These small victories bolstered morale among the troops, though seasoned officers like Marcus remained wary. "We must tread carefully," he warned during a council of war. "Carthage will not sit idly by while we march toward their gates. They are gathering strength, biding their time." His caution proved precious. Within weeks, reports began filtering in of Carthaginian reinforcements converging on the region. Hamilcar Barca, recalled from Sicily to defend his homeland, arrived with a contingent of mercenaries renowned for their ferocity. Among them were Numidian cavalry, lightning-fast riders armed with javelins, and Libyan infantry clad in heavy armor. Together, they formed a formidable force capable of striking swiftly and retreating before the Romans could mount a counterattack. Hamilcar wasted no time implementing his signature guerrilla tactics. Under cover of darkness, his forces launched raids on Roman supply lines, torching wagons laden with grain and ambushing isolated patrols. Each strike sowed confusion and frustration among the invaders, forcing them to divert resources to protect their rear. Yet despite these setbacks, Marcus Atilius Regulus pressed onward, determined to reach Carthage itself. The first major engagement occurred near the town of Addis, perched atop a rocky hill overlooking fertile plains. Recognizing its strategic importance, Regulus ordered an assault, deploying his legions in tight formations designed to withstand missile fire and scale the steep slopes. At first, the Carthaginians held firm, raining arrows and stones down upon the advancing Romans. But as the battle wore on, discipline and determination tipped the scales in Rome's favor. Legionaries breached the defenses, driving the enemy back in disarray. Victory at Addis brought mixed blessings. While it secured valuable provisions and boosted morale, it also exposed the logistical challenges of operating so far from home. Supplies dwindled faster than anticipated, exacerbated by the scorched earth tactics employed by retreating Carthaginians. Fields lay barren, wells poisoned, and villages abandoned. Disease spread through the ranks, fueled by heat, hunger, and exhaustion. Even Marcus, hardened by years of warfare, found himself questioning whether the cost of victory outweighed the benefits. In Carthage, Panic gave way to resolve as leaders scrambled to organize a response. Senators debated fiercely, torn between advocating peace negotiations and committing fully to total war. Ultimately, pride prevailed. Envoys were dispatched to Greece, seeking aid from the Spartan general Xanthippus, whose reputation for military genius preceded him. When Xanthippus arrived in Carthage, he immediately set about reorganizing the army, emphasizing discipline, coordination, and innovative use of terrain. Under Xanthippus's guidance, Carthage assembled a new force combining experienced veterans with fresh recruits. Elephants, towering beasts rarely seen outside Africa, were integrated into the ranks, adding psychological intimidation to their arsenal. Hamilcar worked closely with Xanthippus, learning from his expertise while ensuring loyalty among the diverse contingents under his command. The decisive confrontation came in the spring of 255 BCE near the town of Tunis. Positioning themselves on high ground, the Carthaginians awaited the Roman advance with confidence born of preparation and desperation. Marcus Atilius Regulus, eager to capitalize on earlier successes, ordered a frontal assault without fully accounting for the enemy's adaptation. As the legions surged forward, they encountered unexpected obstacles, deep trenches dug overnight, and concealed pits designed to cripple advancing troops. When the elephants charged, chaos erupted. Unfamiliar with such creatures, many Roman soldiers broke ranks, fleeing in terror as the massive beasts trampled friend and foe alike. Cavalry units flanked the disorganized infantry, cutting off retreat routes and inflicting heavy casualties. By sunset, the once proud Roman army lay shattered, its survivors forced to surrender en masse. Among those captured was Marcus Atilius Regulus himself, taken prisoner alongside thousands of his men. News of the disaster sent shockwaves through Rome, where senators convened emergency sessions to assess the fallout. Some called for immediate withdrawal from North Africa, arguing that further losses would destabilize the Republic. Others advocated reinforcing the remaining garrisons, hoping to salvage something from the wreckage. For Marcus Valerius Corvus, who had narrowly escaped capture thanks to quick thinking and sheer luck, the defeat at Tunis was a bitter pill to swallow. Standing amidst the ruins of what had seemed an unstoppable advance, he reflected on the lessons learned. "Pride blinds us," he muttered to Quintus. "We underestimated our enemy, and now we pay the price." Back in Carthage, celebrations erupted in the streets as citizens hailed Xanthippus and Hamilcar as heroes. Yet behind closed doors, tensions simmered. Some senators viewed the Spartan general with suspicion, fearing his growing influence might undermine traditional power structures. Others questioned whether victory could be sustained, given the toll exacted by years of relentless warfare. As summer approached, both sides prepared for the next phase of the struggle. In Rome, plans were drawn up to evacuate surviving forces from North Africa and refocus efforts on Sicily. Meanwhile, Carthage sought to consolidate gains, reinforcing key positions and launching counterattacks against weakened Roman strongholds. For ordinary citizens caught in the crossfire, life grew increasingly unbearable. Farms burned, trade collapsed, and families starved as resources dwindled. Yet amidst the suffering, stories of resilience emerged. One such tale involved a young woman named Dido, named after the legendary founder of Carthage. When her village fell to Roman raiders, she refused to flee, instead disguising herself as a man and joining a local militia. Her bravery inspired others to resist occupation, turning isolated acts of defiance into coordinated resistance movements. As autumn descended upon the Mediterranean, The war entered a precarious stalemate. Neither side possessed the strength to deliver a knockout blow, yet neither dared abandon the fight. For Marcus Valerius Corvus and Hamilcar Barca, the coming months promised further tests of courage and cunning. Each carried the weight of expectation, not just from their respective nations, but from history itself. Whether they would rise to meet that challenge remained to be seen. One thing, however, was certain: the struggle for supremacy in the ancient world was far from over. The aftermath of the Battle of Tunis reverberated across the Mediterranean, reshaping the trajectory of the First Punic War. For Rome, the catastrophic defeat in North Africa was both a humiliation and a wake-up call. The loss of Marcus Atilius Regulus, once hailed as a hero, now symbolized the perils of overconfidence and poor strategic planning. Yet even in failure, Rome demonstrated resilience, a hallmark of its character that would define the Republic for centuries to come. In the Senate chambers of Rome, tempers flared as senators grappled with the implications of their set. Some called for an immediate end to hostilities, arguing that further engagement risked destabilizing the Republic. Others insisted on doubling down, viewing retreat as tantamount to surrender. Amidst this heated debate, one voice rose above the rest, that of Quintus Fabius Maximus. "We have made mistakes," he declared, his tone measured but firm. "But we are not defeated. Let us learn from our errors and return stronger." Quintus's proposal was simple yet ambitious: evacuate surviving forces from North Africa, regroup in Sicily, and focus on reclaiming lost ground while rebuilding naval strength. This pragmatic approach won broad support, allowing Rome to pivot without losing face. Orders were issued to construct new fleets, recruit additional legions, and fortify key positions throughout the western Mediterranean. The message was clear: Rome would not falter. For Marcus Valerius Corvus, who had narrowly escaped capture at Tunis, the evacuation marked a bittersweet chapter. As Roman ships departed African shores laden with wounded soldiers and shattered dreams, he stood on deck watching the coastline fade into the horizon. "This is not the end," he told himself, gripping the railing tightly. "It is merely a pause before the storm." Back in Carthage, celebrations over the victory at Tunis gave way to sober reflection. While Xantippus's leadership had delivered a decisive blow, fissures within the ruling class threatened to undermine long-term stability. Senators openly questioned whether reliance on foreign generals like Xantippus compromised Carthage's sovereignty. Hamilcar Barca, ever loyal to his homeland, found himself caught between admiration for Xantippus's tactical brilliance and unease about his growing influence. When Xantippus requested permission to return to Greece following the battle, few mourned his departure, yet his absence left a void that no single leader could fill. Hamilcar assumed primary command, consolidating his authority through a combination of charisma, competence, and calculated ruthlessness. He understood that maintaining momentum required striking quickly before Rome could recover. Thus, he launched a series of raids along Sicilian coastlines, targeting Roman supply depots and disrupting communication lines. These hit-and-run tactics proved effective, keeping Roman forces off balance and buying precious time for Carthage to rebuild. Yet they also highlighted a fundamental limitation: guerrilla warfare alone could not secure lasting victories. To break Rome's grip on Sicily, and by extension, ensure Carthage's survival, Hamilcar needed more than fleeting successes. He needed a decisive triumph. Meanwhile, in Rome, preparations for renewed conflict accelerated. Shipyards buzzed with activity as craftsmen labored tirelessly to expand the navy. Engineers refined designs based on lessons learned during earlier engagements, improving hull durability and optimizing boarding mechanisms like the corvée. Recruitment drives swept through Italian towns, drawing farmers, artisans, and freedmen into the ranks of the legions. Training intensified, emphasizing adaptability alongside discipline. Marcus Valerius Corvus played a pivotal role in these efforts. Appointed commander of a newly formed naval squadron, he oversaw drills designed to enhance seamanship and combat readiness. Though land battles remained his forte, he embraced the challenge of mastering maritime warfare, recognizing its critical importance to future success. Under his guidance, inexperienced sailors transformed into competent oarsmen and fighters, united by a shared sense of purpose. By early 254 BCE, Rome was ready to strike back. A massive fleet set sail for Sicily, carrying reinforcements intended to bolster besieged garrisons and launch fresh offensives. Among their targets was Panormus, modern-day Palermo, a key port city still under Roman control despite repeated assaults by Hamilcar's forces. Securing Panormus would provide a secure base for operations deeper into Carthaginian-held territories. The campaign began promisingly. Roman siege engines battered Panormus's walls, creating breaches large enough for infantry to exploit. Inside the city, defenders fought valiantly, led by Hamilcar himself. Street-to-street clashes erupted as legionaries poured through gaps in the defenses, met every step of the way by determined resistance. Blood flowed freely, staining cobblestones and filling the air with cries of pain and fury. Yet just as victory seemed within reach, disaster struck. A sudden storm battered the region, scattering the Roman fleet and severing vital supply lines. Without reinforcements or provisions, Roman commanders faced a grim choice: withdraw or risk annihilation. Reluctantly, they opted for retreat, abandoning hard-won gains and retreating to safer positions. For Hamilcar, the reprieve was welcome but temporary. He knew Rome would return, stronger and better prepared. In response, he redoubled efforts to fortify key strongholds and rally local allies. Diplomacy became as crucial as military strategy, with emissaries dispatched to negotiate treaties and secure loyalty among wavering tribes. His ultimate goal remained unchanged: wear down Rome until they sued for peace. As winter approached, both empires braced for another year of bloodshed. In Carthage, merchants tightened belts as resources dwindled, while priests prayed fervently for divine intervention. Across the sea, Roman families mourned sons lost to war, clinging to hope that sacrifices would pave the way for eventual triumph. Fields lay fallow, trade routes disrupted, and economies strained under the weight of prolonged conflict. Yet amidst the hardship, resilience prevailed. Stories of heroism spread like wildfire, inspiring courage even in the darkest times. One such tale involved a young boy named Lucius, son of a farmer conscripted into the army. When raiders attacked his village, Lucius rallied neighbors to defend their homes, using makeshift weapons and sheer determination to drive the invaders away. His actions earned him the nickname Lion Cub, a symbol of defiance against overwhelming odds. For Marcus Valerius Corvus and Hamilcar Barca, the coming months promised further tests of leadership and resolve. Each carried the burden of expectation, not just from their respective nations, but from history itself. Whether they would rise to meet that challenge remained uncertain. What was clear, however, was that the struggle for supremacy in the ancient world showed no signs of abating. And somewhere amidst the turmoil, the Mediterranean churned with anticipation, bearing witness to the unfolding drama of two titans, locked in an epic battle for dominance. The year was 250 BCE. And the First Punic War had entered its 15th year. A grueling conflict that showed no signs of abating. Both Rome and Carthage were battered, but unbowed. Their resources stretched thin, yet their resolve unshaken. As battles raged across Sicily, one city emerged as the linchpin of Carthaginian resistance: Lilybæum, a fortified port on the western tip of the island, perched atop rugged cliffs overlooking the sea. Lilybæum was not only a strategic stronghold, but also a symbol of defiance against Roman aggression. Its capture or defense would shape the course of the war. For Marcus Valerius Corvus, now a seasoned commander entrusted with leading the Roman siege, Lilybæum represented both an opportunity and a challenge. Having proven himself in countless engagements, he viewed the campaign as his chance to deliver a decisive blow to Carthage's foothold in Sicily. Yet the task ahead was daunting. Lilybæum's walls were formidable, reinforced over decades to withstand prolonged assaults. Inside, Hamilcar Barca commanded a garrison bolstered by elite mercenaries and loyal citizens, all united in their determination to resist Rome at any cost. As Roman forces converged on the city, the stage was set for what would become one of the longest and bloodiest sieges in ancient history. Tens of thousands of soldiers encircled Lilybæum, erecting siege towers, battering rams, and catapults designed to breach its defenses. Behind them stretched a sprawling camp of tents and fortifications, a temporary city erected to support the massive operation. Marcus surveyed the scene with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "This is where we break them," he declared during a council of war. "But it will not be easy." Inside the city, preparations for resistance were already underway. Hamilcar coordinated closely with local leaders, ensuring that food stores were secured and water supplies rationed. Morale remained high among the defenders, buoyed by the belief that Carthage's superior logistics and reinforcements would eventually turn the tide. "We are not alone," Hamilcar assured the citizens during a public address. "Our allies across the sea will come to our aid. Hold firm, and victory shall be ours." The initial weeks of the siege passed in a tense stalemate. Roman siege engines rained projectiles onto Lilybæum's walls, causing minor breaches that were quickly repaired by the defenders. Attempts to scale the walls using ladders ended in disaster, as volleys of arrows and boiling oil repelled the attackers. Frustration mounted among the Roman ranks, leading some officers to question whether the siege was worth the cost. Casualties mounted, supplies dwindled, and disease began to spread through the camp. Marcus recognized the need for a change in strategy. Drawing inspiration from past campaigns, he proposed constructing a circumvallation, a massive wall encircling the entire city to cut off all avenues of escape or resupply. This ambitious plan required immense labor and resources, but Marcus argued it was the only way to force Lilybæum into submission. After heated debate, the Senate approved the proposal, and work began immediately. Under Marcus's supervision, thousands of soldiers and laborers toiled day and night to erect the circumvallation. Wooden palisades reinforced with earthworks stretched for miles, creating an impenetrable barrier around Lilybæum. The construction of the circumvallation marked a turning point in the siege. With no hope of relief from outside, the people of Lilybæum faced the grim reality of starvation. Food shortages became acute, and tempers flared as desperation set in. Hamilcar, though outwardly composed, knew that time was running out. To break the deadlock, Hamilcar devised a daring plan. Under cover of darkness, he led a small contingent of elite troops through a hidden tunnel beneath the city walls. Their mission was to strike at the Roman supply depots and disrupt the siege machinery. The operation caught the Romans off guard, inflicting significant damage before they could regroup. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Hamilcar might succeed in tipping the balance. But Marcus was quick to adapt. Recognizing the vulnerability exposed by the night raid, he ordered increased patrols around the perimeter and reinforced key positions. When Hamilcar attempted a second sortie days later, he found the Romans waiting. A fierce skirmish ensued, ending in a bloody stalemate that left both sides battered but unbroken. As summer gave way to autumn, the strain on Lilybaeum grew unbearable. Reports of cannibalism filtered out of the city, horrifying even the most hardened warriors. Inside the walls, dissent brewed among the populace, with some factions calling for surrender to spare further suffering. Hamilcar resisted these calls, clinging to the hope that Carthaginian reinforcements would arrive in time to save the city. Finally, in late December, the end came. A traitor within Lilybaeum's ranks opened one of the gates under cover of darkness, allowing Roman forces to pour into the city. What followed was a brutal sack, as years of pent-up frustration erupted into violence. Buildings burned, treasures were looted, and countless lives were lost. Hamilcar managed to escape with a handful of loyal followers, slipping away through another secret passage moments before the city fell. For Marcus, standing atop the ruins of Lilybaeum's once magnificent temples, the victory felt hollow. The cost had been staggering, not just in terms of lives lost, but in the scars left on the land and its people. Yet there was no denying the strategic importance of the triumph. With Lilybaeum under Roman control, the path to conquering Sicily seemed clearer than ever. In Carthage, news of the city's fall sent shockwaves through the ruling class. Senators demanded answers, pointing fingers at Hamilcar for his failure to hold the line. Though Adherbal and others defended him, the young officer bore the weight of shame heavily. "I have failed my family," he confessed bitterly, "but I swear Rome will pay for this." Back in Rome, celebrations erupted in the streets. The Senate declared a public holiday, and sacrifices were made to Jupiter in gratitude for the victory. Marcus received honors for his role in the siege, including a mural crown awarded to those who saved fellow citizens in battle. Yet despite the accolades, he found little joy in the aftermath. The faces of fallen comrades haunted his dreams, and the cries of Lilybaeum's doomed inhabitants echoed in his ears. Winter brought a lull in the fighting, as both sides retreated to lick their wounds and plan their next moves. For Rome, the capture of Lilybaeum was a stepping stone toward greater ambitions. For Carthage, it was a wake-up call, an urgent reminder that survival depended on adapting to Rome's relentless determination. As snow blanketed the Italian peninsula and rain soaked the plains of North Africa, the stage was set for the next phase of the war. Both empires braced themselves for what promised to be an even bloodier struggle. And somewhere between them, the Mediterranean churned with anticipation, bearing witness to the unfolding drama of two titans, locked in an epic battle for supremacy. By 2040 BCE, the First Punic War had dragged on for over 2 decades, leaving both Rome and Carthage exhausted but unwilling to concede defeat. The fall of Lilybaeum had marked a significant victory for Rome, yet it was not enough to bring the conflict to an end. Carthage still clung to key strongholds in Sicily, most notably Drepana and Lilybaeum's sister city, Eric. These bastions of resistance symbolized Carthage's resilience and its refusal to yield entirely to Roman dominance. However, the war's conclusion would ultimately hinge on one final, catastrophic naval battle that would seal Carthage's fate. For Marcus Valerius Corvus, now a consul tasked with overseeing the final stages of the war, the challenge remained daunting. Despite Rome's successes on land, control of the seas remained precarious. Carthage's navy, though diminished, continued to harass Roman supply lines and disrupt operations. To secure lasting victory, Marcus knew that Rome needed to deliver a knockout blow at sea, a decisive engagement that would crush Carthage's maritime capabilities once and for all. The opportunity arose in the spring of 2041 BCE, when Carthage assembled a massive relief fleet to resupply its besieged garrisons in Sicily. Laden with grain, weapons, and reinforcements, the convoy sailed from Africa under the command of Admiral Hanno, a seasoned veteran determined to break the Roman blockade. Unbeknownst to him, however, the Roman Senate had anticipated this move and dispatched a newly constructed fleet under the leadership of Gaius Lutatius Catullus, a skilled admiral who had spent years preparing for this moment. The opposing fleets met off the Aegates Islands, a cluster of rocky outcrops near the western coast of Sicily. As dawn broke over the horizon, the sight of hundreds of warships arrayed in battle formation filled sailors and soldiers alike with awe and dread. The air buzzed with anticipation, punctuated by the creak of oars and the snap of banners flapping in the breeze. Roman tactics relied heavily on their innovative Corvus boarding bridges, which had proven effective in previous engagements. However, the sheer size of the Carthaginian fleet presented a new challenge. To counter this, Catullus devised a novel formation resembling a giant wedge, with the heaviest ships positioned at the front to smash through enemy lines. Behind them trailed lighter vessels tasked with protecting the transports carrying troops and supplies. As the signal horn sounded, the two fleets surged forward, colliding in a cacophony of splintering wood and clashing metal. The initial impact favored the Romans, whose disciplined rowers and superior numbers allowed them to breach the Carthaginian line. Ships locked together in chaotic melees, with legionaries swarming across Corvi to engage in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Blood stained the decks as swords flashed and shields shattered. Hamilcar Barca, observing the chaos from his flagship stationed near Drepana, quickly adapted to the situation, realizing that prolonged engagement with the Roman center was futile. He ordered a tactical retreat, drawing the enemy deeper into a trap. Meanwhile, Admiral Hanno led a flanking maneuver aimed at isolating and destroying the Roman rear guard. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the Carthaginians might turn the tide, but Marcus Valerius Corvus, stationed near the vulnerable rear, anticipated the danger. Rallying his men, he coordinated a desperate defense, using fire arrows and grappling hooks to fend off attackers. His quick thinking bought precious time for reinforcements to arrive, stabilizing the Roman position and allowing the rest of the fleet to regroup. By midday, the outcome became apparent. Despite their numerical advantage and clever tactics, the Carthaginians could not withstand the relentless pressure exerted by the Romans. Ship after ship succumbed to boarding parties or sank beneath the waves, leaving behind a trail of wreckage and bodies. By sunset, the Carthaginian fleet had been decisively defeated, losing nearly half its vessels while suffering minimal losses themselves. For Marcus and his comrades, victory at the Aegates Islands felt like a turning point. Not only had they secured safe passage to North Africa, but they had also demonstrated beyond doubt that Rome could match and surpass Carthage on the seas. As celebrations erupted aboard the surviving ships, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of pride. Today, He declared to his men, "We have shown the world what Romans are made of." Yet even amid the jubilation, sobering realities loomed. The journey to North Africa remained fraught with peril, and the challenges awaiting them on foreign soil were unknown. Supplies were stretched thin, and morale would need constant bolstering if they hoped to sustain momentum. Moreover, the defeat at Cape Acronemus stung deeply in Carthage, igniting calls for vengeance and prompting urgent discussions about how best to respond. Back in Carthage, the mood was somber yet resolute. Senators convened emergency sessions, debating whether to sue for peace or prepare for total war. Many argued that surrender was unthinkable. Others suggested negotiating terms to buy time for rebuilding their navy. Ultimately, pride won out. Carthage resolved to fight on, committing additional resources to defend its homeland. As autumn approached, the Roman fleet anchored off the coast of North Africa, preparing for the next phase of the campaign. Scouts reported that local tribes were wary of Roman intentions, complicating efforts to secure alliances or gather intelligence. Supplies dwindled faster than expected, forcing commanders to ration food and water carefully. Disease spread through cramped quarters, further straining already frayed nerves. Despite these hardships, the decision was made to press inland toward Carthage itself. Led by Marcus Atilius Regulus, Roman forces disembarked and began marching across parched landscapes dotted with olive groves and scrubland. Their advance was slow but steady, marked by skirmishes with tribal militias and occasional ambushes by Carthaginian cavalry units. Each step brought them closer to their ultimate goal, but also deeper into hostile territory. For Hamilcar Barca, still operating in Sicily, news of the invasion ignited a mix of fury and admiration. Though far removed from the main theater of action, he recognized the significance of Rome's gambit. "They mean to bleed us dry," he muttered to Hannibal during a council of war. "But let them try. We will make them regret setting foot on our shores." As winter descended upon the Mediterranean, both empires braced themselves for what promised to be the bloodiest chapter yet in their protracted struggle. For Rome, success in North Africa could spell the end of Carthaginian resistance. For Carthage, failure meant the loss of everything they held dear. Between them lay fields soaked with blood, cities reduced to rubble, and countless lives hanging in the balance. And somewhere amidst the turmoil, Marcus Valerius Corvus and Hamilcar Barca prepared for the battles ahead, each driven by duty, honor, and the unyielding will to prevail. The Battle of the Agates Islands marked the beginning of the end for Carthage in the First Punic War. With their navy shattered and supply lines to Sicily severed, Carthage found itself cornered, unable to sustain its garrisons or mount further resistance. For Rome, the victory was not just a triumph on the battlefield, but a culmination of decades of perseverance, innovation, and sacrifice. Yet even as peace negotiations began, the scars of war lingered, both on the land and in the hearts of those who had fought so fiercely. In the aftermath of the naval catastrophe, Carthaginian envoys traveled to Rome to sue for peace. They were met with cold pragmatism from the Roman Senate, which demanded harsh terms in exchange for an end to hostilities. After weeks of tense deliberations, the Treaty of Lutatius was signed in 24th BC, marking the formal conclusion of the First Punic War. Under its provisions, Carthage agreed to evacuate all territories in Sicily, ceding control of the island entirely to Rome. A substantial indemnity was imposed on Carthage, payable over 10 years, to compensate Rome for the costs of the war. Carthage forfeited its naval dominance, reducing its fleet significantly and pledging not to interfere in Mediterranean affairs without Rome's consent. For Marcus Valerius Corvus, now among the most decorated commanders of his generation. The treaty brought mixed emotions. On one hand, it represented vindication, a validation of Rome's resolve and ingenuity. On the other, it underscored the immense cost of victory. Tens of thousands of lives had been lost, families torn apart, and economies strained to the breaking point. As he stood in the Senate chambers during the signing ceremony, Marcus reflected on the sacrifices that had made this moment possible. "We have won," he thought grimly. But at what price? Hamilcar Barca, meanwhile, bore the weight of defeat heavily, though he had fought valiantly throughout the war. The fall of Lilybaeum and the destruction of the Carthaginian fleet left him discredited in the eyes of many senators. Some whispered accusations of incompetence, others blamed him outright for the loss of Sicily. Yet despite the criticism, Hamilcar remained steadfast in his loyalty to Carthage. In private meetings with influential leaders, he argued passionately against surrendering completely. "This is not the end," he insisted. "It is merely a pause before the storm." His words carried little sway in the immediate aftermath of the treaty. As Carthage focused on survival rather than revenge, the indemnity payments drained the treasury, forcing cuts to public services and increased taxation. Merchants complained bitterly about disrupted trade routes, while priests prayed fervently for divine favor. Ordinary citizens struggled to cope with rising prices and unemployment, their frustrations boiling over into sporadic riots. Amidst the chaos, Hamilcar quietly began laying the groundwork for Carthage's recovery. One of his first acts was to secure approval for military reforms aimed at rebuilding Carthage's strength. Drawing lessons from the war, he advocated for a more centralized command structure and greater reliance on native troops rather than mercenaries. He also pushed for expansion into new territories, particularly in Spain, where rich deposits of silver and gold promised to replenish the depleted coffers. When the Senate hesitated, citing fears of provoking Rome, Hamilcar countered with a simple yet compelling argument: "If we do nothing, we perish. If we act, we may yet rise again." By 2037 BCE, Hamilcar had secured permission to lead an expedition into Iberia. Accompanied by his young son Hannibal, a boy barely 9 years old, he set out to carve out a new empire for Carthage. Over the next decade, he conquered vast swaths of territory, establishing lucrative mining operations and forging alliances with local tribes. His efforts laid the foundation for what would become known as the Barcid Empire, a power base independent of but loyal to Carthage. Back in Rome, the spoils of victory brought both prosperity and challenges. Control of Sicily solidified Rome's position as a dominant force in the Western Mediterranean, opening up new opportunities for trade and expansion. Yet integrating the island into the Republic proved difficult, as local populations resisted Roman rule and insurgents launched sporadic uprisings. To maintain order, Rome established a system of provincial governance, appointing governors tasked with overseeing administration and tax collection. While effective in theory, the system often led to corruption and exploitation, fueling resentment among subjugated peoples. For Marcus Valerius Corvus, life after the war was bittersweet. Now in his late 40s, he retired from active duty, content to spend his remaining years tending to his estate near Capua. Yet the memories of battle never left him. Nights were haunted by visions of fallen comrades and cries of the dying. Days were filled with quiet reflection, interrupted occasionally by visits from younger officers seeking advice or stories of past glories. Among them was Scipio Africanus, a rising star in the Roman military, who idolized Marcus for his achievements. "Tell me," Scipio once asked during a visit, "what is the greatest lesson you learned in war?" Marcus paused, gazing out at the fields stretching beyond his villa. "That war changes no one," he replied finally. "It only reveals who we truly are." As the years passed, tensions between Rome and Carthage simmered beneath the surface. Though bound by the Treaty of Lutatius, neither side trusted the other fully. Rome watched with growing unease as Hamilcar expanded Carthage's influence in Spain, fearing that another conflict was inevitable. In Carthage, resentment festered among those who viewed the treaty as a humiliation too great to endure. Young Hannibal, raised under his father's shadow, grew up hearing tales of Roman treachery and Carthaginian valor. By the time he inherited command of the Barcid forces in 2020 BCE, his hatred for Rome burned brighter than ever. Thus, even as the First Punic War faded into history, its legacy endured. Fields once soaked with blood gave way to olive groves and vineyards, yet the soil remained fertile ground for future strife. Families rebuilt homes destroyed by siege engines, only to see them threatened anew by shifting alliances and rival ambitions. And somewhere amidst the turmoil, two empires prepared for the next chapter in their epic struggle. A sequel destined to dwarf the original in scale and savagery. When Hannibal crossed the Alps in 2013 BCE at the outset of the Second Punic War, he carried with him not just elephants and armies but the unyielding will to avenge his father's defeats. For Rome, the challenge was clear: defend everything they had fought so hard to achieve or risk losing it all. Between them lay rivers of ink waiting to record the deeds of heroes and villains, mountains ready to echo the clash of arms, and seas eager to bear witness to humanity's endless quest for power and glory. And so, the story of the Punic Wars continued, not as a tale of closure, but as a reminder that history is written, not in final chapters, but in cycles of conflict and resolution, ambition and consequence, triumph and tragedy.